welcome all to our first virtual meeting. It seems so far so good. I was supposed to do this on Facebook Live also, and we tried it this afternoon and it worked, or this morning, but it's not working now. So I don't know why, but it won't connect. But we're all on here, so the important people are all here. Okay. The only piece of business, so we've sort of been talking about birds, so that was good. That's something we normally do. I did want to announce the winners of our Big Day Backyard Birding Contest. If you had seen on the email, since we had to cancel our normal Big Day outing, we did a contest for folks to bird in their backyard and send me the email list, send me your checklist, and when we just did a random drawing of anybody who sent their checklist in from, this was the first weekend in May. And we just did a random drawing because not everybody's backyard is going to have as many birds as others. So it wasn't the number of species, it was just the effort that you got out and did it that counted. So, and what we did do is we are offering some gift certificates to Wild Birds Unlimited, a $100 gift certificate and two $25 gift certificates. So, drum roll. Let's see, third place was for $25 was Christy Morrow. Are you on, Christy? I did invite these folks to join the meeting. Second place for a $25 gift certificate was Matt Woodson. Matt, I don't hear any whoops or yells, so I guess he's not on. And first place for the $100 gift certificate was Carolyn Wheeler.
Oh, $100.
Well, we'll all do a yippee-yi-yo for Carolyn since she's not here. I'll email. I did tell them, they did not need to be present to win. So.
Yeah, Wild Birds Unlimited is open, and they're doing a lot of work. They said they've been real popular.
Yeah, Are they open to go in the store now, or just still curbside?
Still curbside.
Yeah. But if you go up there, if you're interested in something, they'll bring it out to you. You can talk to them on the phone, and they'll bring it out to the window so you can look at it and, conduct the entire transaction curbside. So we encourage you guys to, if you need anything, to go there. Okay, well, if there's no other, that was the only other business I had. And as I mentioned in my email, we were supposed to be having our elections this spring for new officers and directors, but with the meetings being canceled, the board has decided to postpone that until the fall. Hopefully we'll be able to meet again then, but if not, we'll figure it out. We'll figure out how we're going to handle it then. Okay, so I would like to introduce our speaker, who is Jay Pruett. He's a past director of the conservation for the Nature Conservancy here in Oklahoma. Been a long time Tulsa Audubon board member, and a world birder, I think would be the best way to put it. So, Jay, if you'd like to go begin, if you want to say hi. What I'm going to do next is, let me just explain, and I think I said earlier, if you haven't done this, you might want to go full screen. In the upper right corner of your screen, there should be an icon, a button you can push to go full screen. You can just see a little better. And I am going to mute and turn off everybody's video except for Jay. And then at the end, I'll unmute everybody and allow you to then rejoin video, and we'll have some questions and answers after the program. So you won't be able to ask any questions during the program. I'll have everybody muted because I think that this might be a little too difficult. But we will have a chance after he's done speaking to ask questions. So Jay, if you want to go ahead and, well, let me mute all, and then I'll unmute Jay.
Okay, hoping everybody can see my shared screen. So as I was mentioning, I had the pleasure of going to Costa Rica last year in March, and I'm going to show you a few photographs from there. And my intention really is to give you a sense of the biodiversity of birds in this particular place. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about individual ones or anything. It's going to be a kind of a straight rocket shoot through the whole deal. And I'm not expecting you to remember this particular thing or that particular thing. It's just kind of get a sense of absorbing it all and feeling sort of the overwhelming nature of the whole thing. So we'll get started. First, a few details. Costa Rica itself is about the size of West Virginia, which is not very big at all. And it has about 5 million people. That's a little bit more than a million more than Oklahoma. So it's not heavily populated either. Ecotourism is a major industry there, and they've been doing it well for a long time. So they have good infrastructure like roads and hotels and restaurants and that sort of thing. And the good thing about Costa Rica is it's got 920 plus recorded species of birds that are known to be there. That's more than the United States and Canada combined. So that's a lot of birds for a little place. Good reason to go. So some specifics about the trip itself. It was a scheduled trip with field guides birding tours called their Classic Costa Rica trip. The dates were March 16 to 31st last year. Our tour guide was a great one, Jay Vandergast, and he lives in Quebec. We only had 6 people on this trip, which makes it super easy to do. And those folks were from Indiana, New Mexico, and Washington, as well as me. We toured around by van. There were no internal flights, which was easy too. And we tried to see as many different kinds of habitats as possible. So Caribbean foothills, montane forests, Pacific lowlands, mangroves, coastal mudflats, among them. This will show you the route of the 2 weeks we spent. We started off in San Jose and went up to La Selva, down to Braulio, to Penny, then on down further on the west side and up to Carrera, and finally to the Monteverde Cloud Forest. Great way to end. Okay, of course, there are going to be some birds when you go to Costa Rica that are birds that you've seen before and seen before in Oklahoma. And there's 2 reasons for that. One is that both Oklahoma and Costa Rica are within the entire natural range of a given bird. Or the other is that those particular birds are either migrating from or through Costa Rica to or through Oklahoma. So sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other, sometimes it's both. But at any rate, there are some that are familiar birds that we have seen before, and we saw those in Costa Rica. The osprey, the turkey vulture, broad-winged hawk, that's a sour-faced barn owl, but it's a barn owl nonetheless. Some of the water birds like the great egret, roseate spoonbill. There's a couple of herons down on the left, and then a great blue heron on the right. So those are all familiar birds to us. Other smaller birds too. We saw Wilson's warbler. And for those of you who didn't see the morning warbler today, here's a picture of one. We did see that. And a house wren and the chestnut-sided warblers were in various stages of molting and were hard to identify a lot of times. So if any bird couldn't be identified, it became a chestnut-sided warbler. Other birds like the spotted sandpiper, the willet, the sanderlings, and the whimbrel are all birds that we are familiar with. And a few more, and we'll quickly go through these. Summer tanager. We saw one scissor-tail flycatcher migrating through. And that was the only one we saw, and it's the only time we saw it. So he was on his way. Northern rough-winged sparrow, rough-winged swallow, and belted kingfisher, all were down there. Also, hairy woodpecker, cliff swallow, Tennessee warbler, Baltimore oriole, all birds with which we're familiar. There were also birds that we could have seen in other parts of the U.S. White-winged dove, great kiskadee. Those are in the southern parts of some of the Southwest states. White-tailed kite, common paraki, same thing. But let's talk about the birds we saw in Costa Rica that may not be so familiar. We'll start off with the water birds. We took a one-day trip in a boat onto the a river that was going into the brackish water lagoons, and we saw a mix of freshwater and saltwater species related there. Magnificent frigatebird, a big dude, all black with his red beard. And a junior frigatebird. First time I'd seen one with the white. Also, neotropical cormorants were there. We get those in Oklahoma once in a while. This guy is a boat-billed heron. And unfortunately, he's hiding his boat bill. But take my word for it, it's broad and big. There were terns there, mostly sandwich and royal terns. There were a few elegant terns mixed in as well. We did see brown pelicans. And here is a yellow warbler. I know it doesn't look like one, but it is a resident of Costa Rica variety of the yellow warbler that's called the mangrove yellow warbler. It lives there year round, and the males have developed this kind of brownish rufous head, and they have less of the streaking, orange streaking on the underneath as well. And they are found only there in the mangroves. We had mangrove swallow too, which also likes to hang around in the mangroves. The northern jacana is kind of a wetlands bird that can be on the edge of waters, but in shallow lakes and things like that as well. Quite the showy bird when he gets ticked off when you get too close. This is a bird that's not from the shore. He is from the clear flowing mountain rivers and streams. And it's a bird that was a nemesis bird for me for 20 years at least. The fasciated tiger heron. When I told the guide that I have seen other tiger herons, but never this one, he said, "You're gonna see it tomorrow." So that was a big plus, seeing a life bird that I've been looking for a long time. And his cousin, the bare-throated tiger heron, pretty dapper looking. They're pretty secretive, but it's nice when you can finally catch up to one. And here are two of that bird's offspring. They're getting pretty big, pretty feisty with each other, but cool to see. This is another water bird of sorts called the sunbittern, and this is the male. I've seen them before, but they're just so cool, and they are pretty secretive too, but when they fly, you get to see this outrageous pattern on their wings, which is just really something special. But that wasn't our only treat here with the sunbitterns. We found a nest with a female sitting on it, and she was watching me very closely because she had a chick right down there at the bottom of the nest. You can see the chick, and the guide said he had seen them before, but he'd never seen one on the nest, much less one with a chick in the nest. So that was a pretty good find. The American dipper, like the ones that are out in the Rocky Mountains, they are here as well. Now we'll look at a few of the raptor species, the birds of prey. And since we're in the mangroves to start with, this is the mangrove variety of the common blackhawk. And most of them are darker than this one, but they do like to hang out there. Another raptor, although he's kind of a pint-sized one, is the bat falcon. And we saw them both over the mangroves and inland. This one is not living up to his name very well because he was plucking a bird there for breakfast, and that's not a bat. So, and here's one of the inland birds. You can see he's pretty wet. That's because it rains a lot in Costa Rica. And on our trip, we had probably half the days where it rained. Fortunately, it was not such heavy rain that we couldn't go out birding. We only lost one half of one afternoon to rain, but the rain was around. And of course, it's the rain that helps produce a lot of the biodiversity. Short-tailed hawk is another one that we saw. Kind of dapper there, and is black and white. And here's a semi-plumbeous hawk. Plumbeous referring to the lead color, of course. And while we're on plumbeous, there's a plumbeous kite. And this is the only one of those that we saw. Swallowtail kites are there as well. This one has some kind of prey. It looks like some kind of water bird, a duckling or a nestling of some kind of water bird. Taking it off to feed his chicks, I imagine. But you know, these swallowtail kites are just so agile and they fly so effortlessly. It's amazing. They seldom flap their wings. And boy, can they maneuver. Just really cool to watch them go. Roadside hawk is a pretty common Latin American bird. This one's a juvenile. And we saw him 2 different days on this perch. And you guessed it, he is drying out from the rain. Here's what he's going to look like when he grows up. Another gray hawk, or a gray hawk, a juvenile. And yes, it's raining. Yellow-headed caracaras were found in different places. They're kind of a jack-of-all-trades kind of bird. And we saw one at our hotel one time. And we saw this one on the river. But quite a handsome bird, and they're not too bashful. Black vultures, of course, we have those in Oklahoma, but they were around. And one bird I really wish we could have seen up close was the king vulture. This is the only one we saw, and he was way off in a valley. And really quite an unusual looking vulture, but wish we had a better picture. Well, let's look at some night birds. This is the ferruginous pygmy owl. We saw him in 2 different locations. Very similar to the one that I've seen down in South Texas. Here's a tropical screech owl, really a handsome screech owl. A bare-shanked screech owl. Yes, he's wet from the rain, as we were. And a Pacific screech owl, who was over on the west side of the Central Mountains. A mottled owl. A little bit bigger than the others, but not as big as some. Really like this guy, the crested owl. Look at those furrowed brows. He looks quite perturbed that he's being disturbed. The spectacled owl is one that's seen fairly frequently, and he's interesting because it's really easy to see his spectacles. And here is a black and white owl. He really did not want to wake up raised his eyelids a little bit to see what was going on, then went back to sleep. Black and white owl. One of the nightjars we saw was the dusky nightjar, and this was right at dark, just really not much more than just kind of a form. But we were able to call him in closer, and he lit on some communication lines and got a little bit better look at him, although this isn't a very good photograph. Here's another night bird. This is the common potu, and it's a juvenile. Isn't it amazing how well he blends into that post? And when we got out of the car, we looked around and we couldn't see it, knowing it was there, until somebody finally got close enough to pick it out. And you can see him better when his eyes open. But I got to tell you about this little juvenile potu. He was born from an egg that was laid by his mother on that fence post. She incubated it on that fence post. He hatched on that fence post, and he has been there ever since he hatched on that fence post. So he spent his entire life there and nowhere else. I'm sure he's going to be glad when he gets the rest of his flight feathers and he can take off some. But this particular potu was watched routinely by somebody, and he was always there. Amazing. And some other birds, the pigeons and doves, there's quite a few of them. Pale-vented pigeon, red-billed pigeon, although his bill is only red at the base. Short-billed pigeon, a gray-chested dove, a ruddy ground dove, and yes, it's raining there. A ruddy pigeon, a scaled pigeon. Afraid we weren't going to get to see one, but this one poked his head up for just a few minutes where we could see the scaling on his neck. And there's a group of the doves that are called quail doves, and they're really very secretive, very shy, hard to see, hard to find. I think we saw 3 all total, most of them just a glimpse going through the bushes. This is the only one that gave us any kind of a chance to take a picture. So it's the Cherokee quail dove. Woodpeckers, another big bunch that live in Costa Rica. This is the pale-billed woodpecker. That bill could almost be ivory colored, but it's yellow. The acorn woodpecker, we're familiar from those from the western US. I think we even have those in the Panhandle too. Hoffman's woodpecker. Delineated woodpecker. We saw a lot of these, a lot of places. This is the only cinnamon woodpecker we saw, and it was pretty to behold. And the black-cheeked woodpecker looks pretty dapper with his red hair there. Streak-headed woodpecker, really cloudy and misty, so lucky to be able to tell what this one is at all, but you can see the streaks on his head. So now we'll shift gears to a little more colorful birds and the trogons. And we'll start with the slaty trogon. This is the female. See, she's plain gray all over except for that bright red underneath. The lattice-tailed trogon, the male, brightly colored, reddish orange, green, black, and look at that lattice tail. How do they keep that so neat? And here's the female. The gartered trogon, handsome as well, but this one is yellow underneath. The female's not though. Excuse me, That's the collared toucan. And here's the female of the collared toucan. The black-headed toucan. Big light patches underneath his tail. Black-throated toucan, male. And the toucan of all tougans, the resplendent quetzal. What a gorgeous, stunning bird. I remember seeing pictures of these in National Geographics when I was in grade school. And I thought, man, how could any bird be any more beautiful than that? Especially when you got to see the red side and the white. Just amazing colors. I think to this day, that's one of the reasons that green is my favorite color, is because I first saw it on this bird in a magazine. But they're gorgeous to see. Here's the female. She's pretty handsome herself. Here she is going to work on her nest hole. And she's a hard worker. So you crawl inside and go to work. And after a little bit, the male shows up on the branch outside. You can see the female's tail up there sticking out of the hole just a little bit. And she's in there working, cleaning out that nest, making it bigger. And once in a while, about once every 5 minutes, you see her scrape out a handful of dust and chips right by the male. He sits there, not too worried about anything. Now, I'm not drawing any comparisons to humans here, but some people have done that. Let's look at the parrots. White-fretted parrot is a relatively small one, and this is the only one we saw on the whole trip. He stayed on this tree as we passed by in the vehicle, and we stopped to get out. I snapped one quick picture, and it was gone. The red lord parrot, pretty common. See them flying around, especially early and late. This one eating a seed pod. Here's an orange-chinned parakeet. And if you look right under his chin, you can see a little speck of orange under there. That's really hard to see when they're flying. Here's an orange-fronted parakeet. See the orange front there up above his beak on his forehead. Crimson-fronted parakeets, really noisy and kind of hyper. These two were nesting in the rafters of a cathedral in one of the smaller cities in Costa Rica. And here's one munching on some fresh flowers. When you talk about parrots, you want to talk about the big guys, the macaws. There are two in Costa Rica, the great green macaw. And when they're flying, almost looks like a plane up there. But the real dazzlers, the scarlet macaws. Just unbelievably beautiful seeing them flying in the sunlight. And we did get to see some of these a little closer. A pair that was nesting in a hole close to a walkway where we were walking one day. They can make some noise. All right, let's switch over to toucans. Several of them in Costa Rica. This is the keel-billed toucan. Note that kind of greenish bill there. Another one that's sort of similar is the yellow-throated. I think it used to be called the black-bandibuled toucan. You can see the difference in the pattern on the beak. And catch him resting a little bit. and we even got a little closer up to him. Nice bird. There are also toucanettes, and this is an emerald toucanet. Unfortunately, it was a rainy, cloudy day, and the colors didn't show up very well, but he's normally a bright emerald green. Really pretty bird. Araceres are another group of toucans. This is the collared araceri. And like with most long-billed birds, they secure their food with the tip of their bill, and then they have to kind of throw it up and back so that they can let it go down the gullet and swallow it. I happened to catch him mid-toss. And even when they're eating a mushy old banana, they got to eat it the same way, sort of flip it up and work it back down. Okay, one of my favorite groups of birds, the motmots. This is not exactly a friendly greeting from the lessons motmot. I poked my head into some bushes where I thought he might be, and I was about 3 feet away. He didn't appreciate that. Here's what he looks like when he's back on his meds. Very handsome bird. Another motmot is the broad-billed motmot. They're the small one of the group. And if you couldn't tell his broad bill in that angle, you can see it better on this one. Boy, what a hunk of color. Rufous motmot. Not much missing him. Gorgeous. And the turquoise-browed motmot had one of these staying in right outside my cabin 2 nights in a row, and he would be singing in the morning when I got up, but of course when I opened the door, he was gone. Let's look at some little birds. I mean little birds. The mannequins. Secretive little guys, and they're not much bigger than insects, but I think they're about 4 inches long. This one's a white collared mannequin, and notice the yellow beneath that white collar. Here's a white crowned mannequin. Again, another little guy. The orange collared mannequin. Boy, he was hard to get to see well, but finally got him. The red cap mannequins, boy, they're cute. Got that red head on them, and 1 in the bushes and 2 down in the stream, taking a bath in the evening before they go to roost. Blue crowned mannequin. And the white ruffed mannequin. Of course, they couldn't call him the white collared because there was one already called that, so he is now the white ruffed mannequin. Great little birds. Fly around like little bugs, and just fun to see. Speaking of little birds, some of these birds are small, the wrens, but there are quite a few of them. Band-backed wrens. See where he gets his name. Canebrake wren, which is singing his heart out like we know wrens do. Gray-breasted wood wren, again, aptly named. The white-breasted wood wren. And the green light here is from a light that was used at night to draw in insects to a sheet that was hung up. So he's not really that green shade. He was just in the shadow of the light. Bright bay wrens. This pair was very active, and I think worried we might get too close, but very handsome bird. Striped-breasted wren. He wasn't there long, but we can see his striped breast. White-breasted wood wren. a rufous-breasted wren, the riverside wren, looks like he just got out of prison. Rufous and white wren. And since we're getting into a little color, let's look at some tanagers. They are the masters of color sometimes. Here's a scarlet rump tanager, the male. Yes, it's raining. And just to show you, as we know, there's contrast between the males and the females on a lot of these. Here's the scarlet rumped female. There are actually 2 species of scarlet rumped in Costa Rica, and they're very similar, but a little different. They just live in different parts of the country. Flame-colored tanager. Kind of reminds me of a western tanager a little bit, but a lot more color. The red-throated ant tanager. The red-collared tanager, pretty shy. Golden hooded tanager, multicolored. Palm tanager, almost unicolored, but you can see where that would fit in good camouflage-wise. They're pretty common around the country. As is the blue-gray tanager. This is an emerald tanager. A silver-throated tanager. I like how these guys are aptly named so that you can see that the bird does match the name. The spangled-cheeked tanager. Pretty cool. Okay, let's look at some big birds again. This group of birds are sometimes referred to as the chickens of the forest. I don't know if that's because they look like a chicken or because they taste like a chicken, but they're pretty big birds. The guans, this is a crested guan. There's also a black guan. Again, a big bird. And as big as they are and as easy as it looks like it would be to spot, most of the time you don't see them until you hear them flying out of the understory or out of the trees. And if you do catch a glimpse of them when they do that, they look something like that. That's usually the view we get of them. Here's a gray-headed chachalaca. Kind of similar to our plain chachalaca down on the Texas coast. Looks kind of like a chicken. Probably does taste kind of like a chicken. And here's the kind of the king of the group, the great curassow, and the male here with his yellow bulbous nose. And yes, it's raining. Cool bird. Okay, let's look at some of the grackle and their relatives. Great-tailed grackles. We've seen some of those. But we haven't seen yellow-billed caciques. Pretty handsome bird with that ivory-looking bill. Here's another cacique. It's the red-rumped cacique. And these birds, like the orioles, they build pendulous nests. Melodious blackbird is common around the country. And they do have a beautiful song, as the name indicates. The Montezuma oropendula. Quite a bird. Quite a name for quite a bird. Very handsome. They're pretty common too. Pretty big. And I mentioned their pendulous nests. This is an oropendula's nest. But those are not oropendulas on the nest. Those are piratic flycatchers. And as their name implies, they have stolen it from Montezuma, They're much smaller than Montezuma, so I don't know how they do that. It must be just with pure persistence and fierceness. There are only 2 jays that we saw in the country. There's only about 6 total. The brown jay is very common everywhere, in the cities, in the country, in the forest. This particular one was following an ant swarm along with about 15 other different species of birds. First time the guide said he had ever seen one following an ant swarm. Of course, when they're flying, they're pretty striking too. The white-throated magpie jay. What a bird. Oh my goodness, this guy is huge. Just to get another look at his size. Pretty incredible bird. I wish we'd have seen more of the jays, but I think they're hard to get to. Now we're going to have a look at some hummingbirds. There are a lot of hummingbirds in Costa Rica. I think people probably go there to see them more than anything else except for maybe the quetzal. They are stunning. They are everywhere. There are all kinds, all colors. And part of the great part of this trip was we had really good opportunities to see them up close and really get a chance to kind of get familiar with them. The rufous-tailed hummingbird, we saw them throughout the trip. And in fact, that was the first bird I saw in the garden of the hotel the first day we arrived. Little guy. The plain-capped starthroat has nested on a utility pole, and apparently he has nested here, or she has nested here for several years because they know to go back and look for it. Quite a long beak. The white-necked Jacobin, very common. Seen it in a lot of places. You can just barely see the tip of the white collar on the back of his neck from which he gets his name. And yes, it is raining. Here's a striped-throated hermit, curved bill, a violet-headed hummingbird. See a good look at the violet there. Here's a long-billed hermit. Could have been called the curved bill hermit too, I guess, but this is the bronze-tailed or red-footed plumulateer. Bright red feet. The black-bellied hummingbird. And yes, he's wet because it's raining. Got his tongue stuck out. This is a purple-crowned fairy, and this was the only bird of this we saw. This picture was taken from about 3 stories above it, right before dark, as it was flying over a pool of water to take a bath. But you can at least see the purple crown. This is one of the prized hummingbirds for people to see on the trip. It's the snowcap. The male has this really white forehead against his kind of magenta color. And he's really small even for a hummingbird, but very cute to see. The white-throated mountain gem has a white throat, in the male anyway. And again, you can see some of that sexual dimorphism in the female, quite different looking. She's got a different job than he does. This is the Talamanca, or admirable hummingbird. I think it was in the not too distant past split from the magnificent hummingbird, which lives down in Big Bend and a few other places in the US. A little bit bigger for a hummingbird. The fiery-throated hummingbird. I don't know how many pictures I took before I ever got one of the fiery throat, because you have to be just lined up just perfectly with the right angle and the light to be able to see that fiery throat, but pretty cool when you see it. White-tailed emerald. Violet saberwing. Probably one of my favorite hummingbirds. They're very active, very common, and they seem to kind of rule the roost when they're around the feeders and all. The scintillant hummingbird. The green-crowned brilliant. Gosh, what a name. What a suit of color he has got on. The green violet ear. And yep, true to the name here too. The coppery-headed hummingbird. It's about the only picture I got of it where you could really see the coppery head. And yes, it's raining. There are a lot more hummingbirds, and I actually had a lot more pictures too, but in the interest of time and space on my PowerPoint presentation, I'll stop there with them. But they were great fun to be close to while they were coming to feeders and seeing them really active really well. There are just a few other birds I want to show you, kind of distinctive. This is the masked tatira, which is a flycatcher. There are scores and scores of flycatchers in Costa Rica of all kinds and sizes, but this one is probably the most brightly colored and really cool looking with the black and the white and the kind of pinkish. The white-throated puff bird. And there are big puff birds like this one, and there are smaller ones, but they're all kind of squatty and got a big beak like that. And this is probably the most adorable bird on the trip we saw, the streak-chested antpitta. They're kind of deep in the forest and don't get to see them very often. But this particular one just happened to be coming down the trail, and we all just froze in our tracks and didn't move, didn't say anything. And he walked practically up and got on my hiking boots, checking us out. And then he went on about his way. He kind of flashes his wings. I don't know if that's to scare up insects like a wall creeper or what, but he flashes his wings pretty regular. Just a cute little guy. And here is another kind of prime bird for Costa Rica called the three-wattled bellbird. And it's kind of a must-see when you go. It was on a very rainy, cloudy, foggy day. I had to get under some leaves to keep my camera dry enough to even poke it up and take a few shots. But this guy sat there, and not only are they strange looking, but they have a strange sound as well. And if you'll hold on a second, I will see if I can play the sound of this bird. Isn't that amazing? I hope you can hear those sounds. They are really loud. You can probably hear them a mile away. So very cool bird, visually and vocally. So there's kind of a quick tour around Costa Rica. I wish I had time to show you all the other things too that we saw. There were mammals, cool reptiles, and tons of butterflies of all kinds. And but they all fit together in that one big, harmonious system of natural processes. And this is a famous painting here that's at the La Selva research station. And it's of a bridge going across the stream there. And in fact, if you'll remember the two bare-throated tiger herons, the junior ones in the tree, that was in a tree right above this bridge in actuality. But we were fortunate to see a lot of the animals depicted in this painting. I wish we'd have seen that cat down here at the bottom, and but we didn't. But we did see a lot of these other animals, including the yellow eyelash viper. We saw the sun bittern down here in the lower right corner. Saw the glossy ibis, spectacled owl. So a lot of the things here we got to see. So the impression I want you to have is that there are still places on the planet where there are habitats that are going full speed in their natural processes, evolution, survival. That's not to say they aren't without threats. There are places here that are under threat, just like anywhere else. But with only 5 million people, when I say that in quotes, the pressures aren't too bad yet. But at some time, it's going to get worse. But it's really refreshing from an ecological standpoint and a conservation standpoint to be able to go to a place like Costa Rica and be able to see the processes at work, all the interrelatedness of everything, the beauty and uniqueness of all the creatures, big and small, and to be able to be kind of there amongst them instead of seeing them from a distance. It's really a wonderful experience. So if you haven't been to Costa Rica, I would recommend it highly. It is not difficult to get to, maybe a 3-hour flight down there on the same time zone. And there are good guides, there are good facilities, there are all kinds of trips to go. So I would encourage you to go if you ever get a chance. It's really something special.